Morning.
How are you?
Pleased to be here at last. Well, I've actually only got 5 minutes to speak, so I'd better get on.
Would you like me to share screen and get the slides up, Roy?
Yes, please.
Let's do it. Thanks for bearing with us, everybody. Much appreciated. Like I said, please do use chat function and questions function, and we'd be delighted. But Roy will talk you through all that stuff.
I've been trying to teach Paddy to use computers for a long time, and he's still not very good. Right. Okay. I take it everybody can see the slides now. Good morning. My name is Roy Deveau, Honorary Research Fellow at the Tizard Centre, and today with Paddy, who you all know, we're talking about development implementation of positive behavioural supports. Now, could you go to the next slide, Paddy? Sorry, I was pressing.
Right. Yeah, I'll be Chris Whitty for today. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, so please use the chat box to make comments or ask questions as we go through. So I was going to speak for 15 minutes, but I think I'm probably going to try and get that done a little bit quicker. So if you've got specific questions for me or for Paddy, please note that. Please feel free also not to say who you are. Can we have the next slide, Paddy?
Yes, I can.
So I guess that in my part, I'm contrasting this idea of clinical and social validity. And these really are very different creatures indeed. So your clinical validity is what you'd expect from a PBS or ABA practitioner. So it's scientific, it's reasoned, and it's led by data. And the advent of PBS was really, in many respects, it came about to answer the problems that people felt with clinical validity and being treated as too much as a scientific, as an object, and having too much data about themselves. So you could say it was led from the heart, from the head. Whereas social validity is really very, very different indeed. It's subjective experiences. So it's experience and emotion led. You could say it's from the heart. And we'll come back to that phrase in a wee while, from the heart. So, and these two are also linked in with some work which I published a couple of years ago, and I did ask whether the paper could be circulated. So far as I know, it's the first look at Daniel Kahneman's work in relationship to ID. So Daniel Kahneman was a Nobel Prize-winning psychologist whose work was on trying to look at the basic functions of the brain, but how that worked itself out in practical applications on a day-to-day basis. And he proposed this two systems of thinking. So in your clinical validity, our dominant thinking mode of Kahneman's two was system 2. And this is conscious, it's mostly logical, it's effortful, it's hard work to consciously work out what you want to do. But system 2 makes the decisions in the end, but it often accepts what our system 1, our unconscious thinking, suggests that we do. So the system 1 of Daniel Kahneman's is this unconscious, it's automatic, it's intuitive, it's largely effortless. And this is the way that most people conduct their social lives and their lives. So if you held your finger up and looked at a distant object and closed one eye and then opened the other one and then did the opposite, you'll see there's two images. Now, the brain does a marvelous job in combining those two images. We don't know that our eyes are seeing different things, but there's a huge amount of activity, neural activity, that goes on to create a single image from those two inputting sensations. So the amount of work that the brain does on this intuitive automatic thinking is huge. And usually we only call in our dominant conscious mode when things are going wrong, or when we need to make a decision, or when we're doing things like analyzing data. System one, our intuitive thinking does not handle data. It can't handle computations or numbers. So, but most of the time, and we're thinking about staff teams here, we'll be functioning in system one because that's effortless. So it takes a deal of effort then to ask them what we often are asking them as practitioners is to operate in system two. So I guess this is part of this problem with wanting clinical validity, also wanting social validity, and yet there's these two different thinking modes. I think we've made one sentence in the article that, in fact, interventions are mostly worked out with people operating in system one, conscious, reasoned, and data-led, but it's implemented by people largely operating in system one. So they're intuitive, largely effortless. And in some respects, what we want staff to feel is largely effortless work, as long as they're doing the right things. Because as soon as you start working in system two, then that is stressful and it's effortful. I think we'll move on to the next slide, Paddy. So there has been a lot of disquiet about some of the clinical and the scientific aspects of ABA and PBS. So we have things like we want things to be more meaningful, we want valued, and we want enhanced well-being, we want good quality of life outcomes. But Gore, Jones and Stafford reckoned in 2020 that quality of life outcomes have largely been neglected, PBS research and practice. And this disquiet really with the scientific approaches to behaviour change. There's a long history, and we go back to the Bible of behaviour analysts, JABA, the Journal of Applied Behaviour Analysis. And if you can go on to the next slide, please, Paddy. And a guy called Montrose Wolf, wonderful name. And he was one of the co-founders, and at this time was chief editor when he published this article, Social Validity, the Case for Subjective Measurement, or How Applied Behaviour Analysis is Finding It's Hard. So again, he's contrasting this scientific approach, the head, with the heart. So he proposed in this article, and this was the seminal article really for getting social validity as a consideration. You could speculate that if applied behaviour analysis practitioners and researchers had taken up his call at that time, PBS may not have even arisen as an approach, but they probably didn't. I've lost my threads now and just looked at a comment. So he proposed it at that time that there were these three things. You've got to look at the social significance of the goals. Is it what society really wants? You've got to look at the appropriateness of the procedures. Are they considered acceptable? So I guess we would hope that there would be extraordinarily few occasions when people would think that punishment as part of a procedure would be an appropriate thing or an acceptable thing to do. And he also proposed the social importance of the effects, i.e. consumer satisfaction. And I would count the implementers as one of the consumers in this respect. Because in a sense, what we're doing when we're asking for behaviour change, we're asking for the whole context to change. So the implementers have got to change as much as the person that we're writing the intervention for. Oh, could you move on, Paddy? got a tale here of 4 characters. There's a young autistic man, school head, ABA school, a very subjective home manager, and me. So I'd been asked to go and meet this young man who lived in the school to see whether we'd be able to provide a service for him. And this was many years ago when I was a service provider. So I took along one of the home managers that I thought might have a suitable service for him. And we went into this classroom. There was a big classroom. There was an old-fashioned easel with a blackboard on it. That's how long ago it was. And there was this young man sitting under there trying to balance 3 books on his head and occasionally slapping his face, which made it rather difficult to balance his books. And anyway, so my home manager drifted off to go and meet him. And I was talking to the school head. And she was telling me about all the programs he was under, self-care programs, communication programs, social skills programs. Apparently he had very poor social skills. So they were working on things like his eye contact, his responses to people. But he was generally, she was saying that he was fairly poor at many of these programs, or being able to take advantage of them. So she said, saying his social skills are really very poor eye contact and those sorts of things. And then she said, oh, he's smiling, and then turned back to me as going on about his social skills, his various programs. So I had a look, and there was my home manager was underneath the easel with this young man. And they were gazing at each other deeply in the eyes and smiling at each other. I thought, oh, then I turned back to this home manager, and I was aware that the school head. Then the home manager came over to us, and she was very enthusiastic, extraordinarily good manager, but very enthusiastic. She says, "Oh, he's lovely." She says, "Can we have him?" I said, "Oh," jarred a bit, that phrase, but anyway, she went back off to be with this young man again. And the school head to me says, "Oh, she's very subjective, isn't she?" I thought, yeah, she is actually, but she's very good. And then I thought to myself, well, if that young man was my son, I was contrasting who I would like to provide his care. And there was really no argument at all in my mind. I would much prefer social validity or subjective experience over the other more clinically valid or scientific basis for providing care. It needs both. So, sorry, Paddy, I keep pressing my computer. Could you give me that screen? So the question is then, I guess, is how well is the twin professions doing it, including social validity in its work? And if we go by that Bible of ABA, the JABA, not very well. So overall, since this is Ferguson et al., I've made this available if you request it from Tia. So if you look at this, then it was pretty poor up until the millennium, then it rose up again. They could find more inclusion of social validity measures there. So at its height, it was probably about 1 in 4, 25%. But then it drifted down again, so that, in the last years of that, up to 2016, it varied between around 15 to 20%. Not particularly good, considering that's a journal whose editorship has been asking for inclusion of social validity measures for several years. And they don't seem to be getting it. And I guess we really ought to accept that this is probably the pinnacle of clinical work that will get published in JABA. So I think I'm going to end there, because I've already gone way over my time because Paddy didn't manage to get me in quickly enough. Anyway, over to Paddy now.
Thanks, Roy. Thanks very much. So Roy and I kind of, as we do often, shooting the breeze on some of this stuff a while back, and it made me think about contextual fit. And when Roy discussed those figures with me, that there's only 12% of articles had addressed social validity. I mean, it'd be interesting for you guys to read the article, because there are some other components that are worth exploring, like is it implicit in the process that we're only discussing socially valid measures and that kind of thing. But you guys can have a look. But I found it really interesting, because on one level, what we're looking to see here, how effective has support been, right? Intervention, support, whatever you want to call it. And social validity is a really key part of, have we been successful here? Has this been useful? Has it been helpful? How do people feel about that? And it was really interesting, because the work that we've been doing over the past few years, we understand how valuable contextual fit has been in terms of supporting kind of effective programs of support for people, for organizations, so on and so forth. But when Roy and I started talking about this, I started to recognize that there was a big overlap, I think, between contextual fit and social validity. And that for any of you kind of geeks out there, that I think we've had a bit of procedural drift with social validity, because it certainly had, for me, become something that we review at the end, essentially. And as Roy kind of alluded to with the definitions there, we should be doing that stuff straight from the outset. And I think that's very similar to contextual fit too. You know, some of the challenges we have with a lot of programs out there, whether it's kind of support for an individual within a family home, or whether it's kind of larger organizational delivery, is that often that contextual fit hasn't been addressed. So I think there's a real overlap between contextual fit and social validity. And hopefully, as we kind of go forward, my slides, we're going to be exploring that a little bit. And then I'm going to kind of circle back to the State of the Nation paper a little bit. So these next sections from me, what I'm going to go through is what contextual fit is, the core components and how they overlap with social validity. I'm going to give you some very brief examples. I'm not going to kind of War and Peace, because interestingly, Roy got me thinking, and I started having a look. For example, International Journal of Positive Behaviour Support, I could only find one article with contextual fit in keywords. Anyway, and then we'll talk about some of the challenges. I'm going to signpost a tool that I think is really helpful for contextual fit as well. We'll kind of signpost that. We'll summarize and give some kind of takeaway messages, and then we'll circle back to that State of the Nation paper. And then hopefully, if you guys have got some questions, Roy and I will kind of we'll discuss those questions. So moving on. So what is contextual fit? Well, contextual fit has been described as that match between the strategies, procedures, or elements of an intervention and the values, needs, skills, and resources available to those who implement and experience the intervention. A real overlap with some of the stuff that Roy was talking about there. And again, bringing it back, looking at the values. And I think some of the challenges some of us practitioners out there have been facing have been questions about the values in many respects, and engaging people early in the process to understand how this is going to fit with your context, your setting, is really key before we do any work, before we start talking about any programs or intervening in anything. So why consider contextual fit then? I'll take you to the next bullet point. The field of implementation science hasn't necessarily centered around PBS and ABA interventions, but there's a kind of wealth of research in the field of kind of implementation science that indicates that the likelihood of effective implementation and achievement of valued outcomes diminishes when the fit between the intervention and setting is poor. And I'm sure you've all seen this, really well-intended practitioners from a range of different fields that are coming in and finding that they're not able to progress the work that they wanted to do for one reason or another. I feel really strongly from the work that we've been doing and the research that I've been doing that contextual fit could be a really useful approach to smoothing some of that fit there, to make sure that people are on the same page before we're trying to implement anything. And when do we look at contextual fit then? again, it had been something that I'd understood as something that you do in the early phases, and I absolutely kind of still subscribe to that. But actually, we need to assess that contextual fit throughout the time that we're engaged with people. Anyone that saw Poonam's presentation this morning was a beautiful example of kind of practice workshops within a service, but talking about how Poonam and the management team have tweaked and changed that as the team's grown and the team's developed and the needs of people living at the service have changed. There's been adaptations made to those processes. So contextual fit isn't a one and done kind of thing. Neither is social validity, as kind of Roy was alluding to. So contextual fit is something that we need to think about in the design and selection of interventions, and that should be done in partnership with people during the process of initial implementation and throughout the ongoing adaptation of interventions to help sustain them. So again, it can be a bit overwhelming, this stuff, and kind of people think, oh, there's more stuff that I need to do. But actually, in our experience, addressing some of this stuff will save you a lot of time further down the road. So I'm giving you that very brief description of contextual fit, but just to go into a little bit more detail, and full disclosure, I've just robbed this from a Horner paper. It's in the references. So yeah, this isn't my work, but this is stuff that I certainly subscribe to and think has been really, really helpful. So some of those core components, and this is the first one, really, really important, about establishing an agreed need for change. You know, before we start talking about what we're going to change or how we're going to approach this, what is the need here? What is the context looking for? The people that this is going to affect and impact. Have we agreed what people are looking for here? What we're looking to change? Because very often there's a mismatch between what a commissioner may ask of kind of the practitioners and what a setting wants in terms of support. So being really clear what that need is first is absolutely key before we look for any implementation efforts. Precision is about that we have clearly defined what this intervention program is going to look like, you know, whether that's kind of work within a family setting on an individual basis or whether this is much larger organisational work. I hear things like, oh, we've implemented a bit of PBS, for example, and it always makes me shudder because I think, which bit, you know, which bit have you implemented and how have you done that? You know, it kind of concerns me. But we see this a lot when people talk about implementing positive behaviour support plans. Again, it's not precisely defined enough in many respects. So that there's precision. People are really clear about what people are going to do and what they're not going to do is really important. That helps people provide that informed consent for the next stage of what you're going to do. People must understand what's going to happen within that context. The third part here is a really key part as well, about there is support for people to understand the evidence related to the proposed intervention. We'll talk a little bit at the end because there's a bunch of different ways of doing that. But I think it's really kind of important, particularly in light of some of the conversations going on around whatever when we've agreed that need and we've spoken about what we're going to do, is there an evidence base that has been successful for people previously? Now, there's work on our hands that we've got to do, right? And kind of the stuff that Roy's talking about, that evidence base needs to contain much more information around social validity. And hopefully the presentation that you're going to see this afternoon, if anyone's in on the practice leadership, there's a lot more of that kind of social validity stuff in there. I can give you some examples of that. Feasibility, so that's the time and effort for implementation is understood by the people it's going to affect, and we've got agreements around that. There's no point signing people up to things that are completely overwhelming that they're not able to do at that point in time. So there's got to be real kind of clarity around what impact is this going to have on a system. You know, very often we see staff that are going off to be trained in PBS, yet there's no accommodation made for them back in the workplace to implement any of the stuff that they've been learning. So there's a real mismatch there. So that feasibility of whatever it is you're looking to implement is really key. Next one, quite an obvious one, but there's the skills and competencies within the context to deliver what's being asked. And again, that might kind of varies across kind of the breadth and scope of your implementation efforts. And we'll come to this in a little bit, because that's one of the challenges. Implementing PBS can mean such a variety of things. The cultural relevance, again, a really key point in terms of the outcomes of the intervention are valued by those that it'll affect, you know. There's that kind of cultural relevance. And again, that also needs to be evident throughout the kind of procedures that we're recommending too, that there's sign up, that there's agreement in terms of those. And I'll give some examples as well in a little bit about kind of mismatch of fit there that we've seen. Next, looking at resources. So the resources are clearly defined and available. You know, if everybody's using a new data system across an organization, for example, has everybody got access to that new data system? It's going to be a really key kind of feature of being able to use it. Implementing kind of communication strategies within school settings, for example, there's going to be resources required. Have we equipped people to gain access to those resources? There's a bunch of things going on here. And then the final one is about administrative and organisational support. So within systems, is the support from key leaders to support the implementation of this? Anyone that's tried implementing kind of positive behaviour support in a hospital setting where there's already another model of kind of care going on, if this work's not done really clearly, it's really hard work to get that stuff off and running. And there needs to be that kind of political support to help people kind of figure out how to integrate these things. But there needs to be that kind of key support across kind of any setting. So these are the kind of 9 core components of positive behaviour support. And one of the things that I thought was really interesting when Roy and I started speaking was that real overlap, I think, with social validity. The social significance of interventions and goals. Well, if we've established a need with people and there's cultural relevance there, I think we're moving towards that. That the social acceptability of the intervention procedures, well, if we precisely define them, people can consent to that or refuse. You know, if we've precisely defined that, we can have much more informed conversations about what does this mean, what's going to happen, and that the social importance of effects, again, something that we need to get better at reviewing. But it just struck me there's a real overlap between contextual fit and social validity. And when Roy and I were kind of talking in the very early stages of this, you know, one of my original presentation titles was Contextual Fit and Social Validity, the missing ingredients, the PBS pie. Roy quite rightly shut me down, but you get where I'm going with it. You know, a lot of this that we're talking about, the 12 key components, yet perhaps we've not seen this stuff feature enough within that. So just to give a couple of examples of contextual fit. So we've kind of spoken about what it is, why you'd use it, when you'd use it. And just want to give you kind of couple of examples. The one article in the International Journal of Positive Behaviour Support that references contextual fit was this one here, An Extra Set of Hands, a qualitative analysis on implementation of interventions for students with the ASD. It's an American, so if anyone's got issue with the ASD thing, it's an American paper. But what they were talking about here was this MAPS program. I don't know if anyone's come across MAPS. So it's a kind of intervention program within schools for to support autistic students. Now, I'm not here to say whether I think that's a good program or not, but the paper talks about there being a good fit with the staff team, the teachers, the families, so on and so forth. But the real challenge was teachers saying, I have got no chance of implementing this in my classroom. I'm so busy, it's going to be impossible for me to deliver this. So the contextual fit piece done there was looking at resources, looking at skills and competence. And essentially they added a coach to each classroom to support that teacher, get it up and running. So there's real links with the practice leadership there. So this stuff doesn't have to be really complex when we start looking at contextual fit. Engage the key people within that setting to have discussions around that kind of feasibility. What these teachers were saying is, look, we love this stuff, but we're not going to be able to implement it. If you want us to implement it, we're going to need some support to do that. So there's a really nice example of that. There's also an example from Scottish NHS education, where there are some parenting programs, and what these parenting programs have done is they've reached out and they now have parent volunteers that come and co-present this stuff with people. And I think that was kind of did a couple of things really in terms of adding some credibility, I think, to that course, that people were talking about real experience. They started to change the times of when those courses were delivered to times that parents said were much more going to be accessible for them. So again, just another way of kind of changing that contextual fit to support the implementation of this. And just one quick practice example from me at the minute. So we have just started working with an ICB. We are working with as a kind of about 10 young people at the minute that we've just started working with, and we've done initial assessment for this one young lady and her family. And mum had sent me some videos, and you know, these really difficult videos of seeing the daughter hitting mum, and just, you know, getting a real understanding of just how difficult that is for mum, for the daughter, for the family at the minute. And there's a part of me that wants to jump straight into that. Jump straight into, right, what am I going to do to stop this hitting? It looks really difficult for mum. There's a real challenge. What does mum want? Mum wants real support to help her advocate for some of the medical issues she thinks her daughter's experiencing at the minute. Contextual fit pieces, that's where we need to start. I think that's where we need to start. That's what mum's asking for. That's where we need to start. Doesn't mean we won't do anything in terms of looking at the other stuff, but loud and clear, mum's telling me this is what I value, this is what's important, this is what I need support to do at the moment. So again, that contextual fit, it's not about what I want to do as a practitioner, it's about that partnership that we have in terms of kind of co-producing work with families to explore that. So look, just here, there's a real challenge for us, because when we're talking about implementing PBS, AB, what does it mean? There's such a variety of implementation pathways. You know, if we just talk about positive behaviour support, well, what's the target population that we're working with? Forgive the kind of term. What settings are we working in? Are these family homes? Are these supported living services? Is it a school setting? Is it a forensic setting? Is it hospital? Is it, you know, what does that mean? What's the implementation pathway? Is this single practitioner? Is it multidisciplinary teams? Is it groups of practitioners working in services? So you'll see there's such a variety of kind of options in terms of implementation. That contextual fit is going to be different everywhere. My experience to date, there is not, and believe me, I've tried having a little bit of a kind of blueprint template that's going to help me speed up the work that I do in services. I haven't figured it out yet. What I'm definitely finding is that we do this bit of work and assess that contextual fit prior to implementation efforts. It saves us so much challenge further down the line. Hence the person pushing the boulder up the hill. That's what it feels like at times. Excuse me. I'm delighted to see my old friend Jamie as one of the participants here, because actually there's a bit of an example here that when Jamie and I worked together, worked for Jamie, small family-run business, values really clear. And I know what Jamie was saying here, we weren't perfect, and we weren't perfect, by no means were we at all. But there was evidence of some really great outcomes for people. You know, some people that have been in some really rubbish situations and that were, without a shadow of a doubt, living better lives. And we developed some really good systems and processes. The practice workshops that Poonam was talking about today, if anyone heard that, you know, they started at that organisation with Jamie. And that organisation kind of changed hands and started working for a bigger organisation. I was told we essentially just want to do what you guys are doing in this small group of services down in Kent. That's what we want to see. We just want to see that stuff rolled out. We really love it. That's why we like the organisation. And I thought, great, we'll just do that then. Absolutely not. You know, that large organisation, the cultural differences were stark, you know, from a small family-run business where you could get around all of the services in one day. We knew everybody's names. We knew all the families. We knew all of that kind of stuff. But the real kind of cultural piece about reducing the use of restrictive practices was such an important value across that organisation. Trying to implement that on a larger scale, it tied me up in knots at first. You know, I hadn't done that contextual fit piece. I did not realise how different it was going to be trying to implement this across a large national provider. So again, some examples there of kind of not looking at this stuff and reaping the kind of challenges from that, versus some examples of just a small bit of time spent assessing that contextual fit ahead can save us so much time. And again, I think it's a real powerful way of engaging that context to discussing what we value, what changes are important here, and how can we work together to look to kind of achieve those. Excuse me. And just quickly, I'm not going to take you through this in detail, but you can find this if you Google NHS Scotland education, you'll find it here. It's a really nice tool that helps people evaluate the evidence base for things before we start looking at implementing them. It's a really nice tool to use with teams before you start something. You'll see from the hexagon, there's kind of program indicators on one side of that hexagon, looking at things like the usability, the supports that be required, the evidence that is there for the application of whatever it is that you're talking about. And then we look at those kind of site indicators, and that could, again, be family, home, organization, you know, all that kind of stuff, and looking at, is there an established need here for the things that we're talking about? Do we have capacity within this context to actually be able to deliver these things? And is there a good fit? Is there a good fit? It's a really lovely tool. And again, I'll talk very briefly about how I think this tool could be kind of used. So just a couple of kind of takeaway messages on contextual fit before we start looking to kind of wrap some of this up. Contextual fit has really been an undervalued factor affecting the quality with which evidence-based interventions are implemented. And look, I know from some of our colleagues, like that, so Andy McDonnell, who unfortunately couldn't be here today, but has always been a really kind of critical friend, talking about the challenges when we saw PBS in NICE guidance, for example, talking about, you know, working with populations where perhaps there wasn't a really strong evidence base for that. So again, I think that's why we've got some of the kickback that we have at times. Have we been really clear about the evidence base for the application of some of these approaches with certain demographics? Next, that it's clear that research is needed to better understand the role and processes of contextual fit, the elements of contextual fit that we explored earlier, that are most important for improving effective implementation. Also, to look at the metrics to assess contextual fit, and that Scottish tool that I just kind of showed you earlier is doing a great start, starting to move some of that stuff forward. So I think it's really important, I'm clear here, that, you know, I love contextual fit. I found this really helpful with our work, but it's early days in terms of understanding the application. You know, perhaps more research needed here. Really key that policymakers should include contextual fit criteria, I think, in funding opportunity announcements to improve selection, adoption, implementation, and sustainability of supported interventions. Again, these big tenders that have been released, kind of, you know, for huge PBS training programs and the like, we need more evidence that this stuff actually works. So it'd be great to see it in kind of tender opportunities, funding opportunity announcements too. That perhaps technical assistance should focus on building strong contextual fit before investing in direct implementation efforts. We need to be disciplined on this, because quite often people just want to get you working, right? They just want you to get in there and get stuff fixed. Actually, in our experience, spending some time to address that contextual fit, to build that first, it's going to make things move quicker. It's going to be more effective. It's going to be more harmonious moving forward. And I think there's also there's an element of this that there hasn't been enough kind of coaching for people around contextual fit, perhaps in some of the kind of PBS courses that people have been able to access. One of the really key points here is that the perception of those who implement and experience the intervention is key in determining the quality of contextual fit. Not down to me to pat myself on the back and say, great job, Paddy, the contextual fit was bang on there. I need that context to tell me about how it feels. Did this feel right for you guys? Was this process useful? Was it helpful? Did you feel included? You know, all of those kind of things. So yeah, we need to make sure people aren't marking their own homework when it comes to contextual fit. I think one of the big messages for me is that this is about engagement. Engagement is so key here. If anyone's looked at the King's Fund stuff, you know, Michael West's research, talking about research into the NHS shows that staff engagement presides over all other measures as the best overall predictor of outcomes. How engaged the staff teams have been. And this includes things like patient mortality. I think we have to take those key messages and understand that we have to engage in really meaningful ways straight from the outset. If anyone gets a chance to hear Deb Austin speak today, she talks about this stuff so beautifully in terms of what co-production really means and how to do it. That engagement is key, whether you're working with families, whether you're working with organisations, whether you're working with teams, that we have to make sure that our PBS that we've addressed that contextual fit, and that we've done that in partnership with key people from the teams. And there's challenges to doing that. There's challenges to get this stuff organized and the time and all that kind of stuff. But certainly in our experience, the juice is worth the squeeze on that. So just a couple more slides, and then we'll kind of open up to questions. But you know, the State of the Nation paper had certainly put the cat amongst the pigeons, right? And having reread it a number of times, it's a call for us. It's a call for us out there that are engaged in this work, that are trying, that are sometimes making mistakes, that are sometimes getting things right, to share that and to give a good account for positive behaviour support, to show what it's capable of. You know, having some of these discussions around, should it be PBS, should it be something else, should it? I think communities need the options to the ability to be able to choose. You know, is PBS right for everybody? Not for me to say. Is any approach right for everybody? I don't think there's anything that's right for everybody. But what's important for us that are working in the field is that we provide the evidence about things that have worked and the things that don't work, to help people move this forward. One of the questions that, or sorry, one of the statements that we heard recently when we were engaging with a parent group is that ABA is training people to be neurotypical when that's not what they are. And it's so disappointing to hear that that's a perception that's out there. And again, not for me to start arguing that, but there's a real great evidence base of how helpful some of these approaches have been. And just chucking that at people is not going to help it. But you know, I think there's never been a more important time for us to demonstrate that engagement in program design right from the inception is absolutely key. Enshrining kind of social validity into the process, it has never been more important. You know, we're not going to change people's hearts and minds necessarily with science and data. You know, we need to be much more multifaceted than that in terms of these approaches. But most importantly, we need to ensure that we're effective. And I think going back to Roy's points, we can't know whether we're effective or not unless we're doing more around that kind of social validity. The data is really helpful for us, you know, at times, but we have to understand the part that it plays within the work that we're doing. Honestly, final slide, then we'll come to questions, because I can see Roy's getting restless with me. But there's a lovely little article here I found the other day on the Scientific American. It spoke about this pyramid of choice. So forgive me, because I only come across this the other day, so I'm going to read a couple of bits. But starts off with this great line, right? Have you ever noticed that when you present people with the facts that are contrary to their deepest beliefs, they always change their minds? Me neither. And I think it's really important for us at the minute with the conversations that we're having to look at that. So it reminded me of a quote that Nick Barrett introduced me to, a Carl Sagan quote that said, "You can't convince a believer of anything, for the belief is not based on evidence, it's based on a deep-seated need to believe." Look, there's a wealth of evidence out there about how ABA has been helpful for people. Not only people with learning disabilities, not only some of those people may also be autistic, but neurotypical, but there's a bunch of different applications. But within that, isn't that interesting, right? If there's already all of this evidence out there, how are we not winning some of those arguments? We clearly need something else. We clearly need something more. This pyramid of choice is really interesting. And the authors describe this backfire effect, this kind of paradoxical impact in which kind of two people side by side at the apex of the pyramid, how quickly they diverge and end up at completely different points. And when one's trying to correct the other, they end up moving further away and further away and further away. So we need to be really careful with how we kind of handle some of these conversations. You know, I've heard people saying that PBS is just ABA, and because it's that, it's wrong, it's punishing, it's terrible for people. Well, look, I think there is evidence out there that it's been really helpful for people, and you're going to hear from other families today about how helpful kind of PBS has been. But we clearly need to do some more. And I think the case for us looking to make sure that we're effective, that we're positively impacting people's lives, positively impacting the kind of context, and the data is going to be helpful for us with that, but we're really going to need to get better, I think, at the social validity aspect to ensure that we can do that. So look, I'm going to shut up now. We'll have a look to see if there are any questions. But yeah, guys, thanks very much for listening in. I hope it's been useful. And yeah, I'm just going to check the chat function now to see if we have had any questions.